Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Story, President, Dalkani Tokyo Training Japan. An old friend of mine, Christian Baudat, is the country manager for Ascott International. And we're in the beautiful headquarters here of the Oakwood residences in Midtown.
Yes.
Very beautiful building and beautiful arrangements. I've actually been to a number of functions downstairs in the past. It's always very impressive routine that you've got here. So, Christian, we've known each other for a long time. You've had different iterations in Japan, but
yes,
let's go back. And how is it that you wound up in Japan in the first place? And then how is it that you're now running Ascott? So just give us a bit of the background on that. And
all right.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Okay. So I graduated from a hotel school in Switzerland, the first international hotel school, the one in Lausanne, École Hôtelière de Lausanne, which is now, I think, one of the prominent schools in the hospitality industry, but is moving towards a university level education. I graduated in 85, and during my studies, I did an internship in Hong Kong, and I wanted to go back to Asia.
Why? You're from Europe, Switzerland is a pretty good place.
Well,
so
I was born and raised about 20 minutes away from the school, from the university, and I knew that if I would start this career, I would like to travel and see different parts. I come from a very small town in Switzerland, which is actually famous for a few things in Switzerland. One of them is the first production site of the Nespresso capsules,
Okay.
So sometimes the whole city smells like coffee. So it's a small town, and I wanted to see the world. I then graduated from the school and was given an opportunity to join the Hilton group as a management trainee, and I started in 85 in Shinjuku.
Oh, well, they said your first posting was Shinjuku.
Was Shinjuku.
Wow, yeah. That's dropping you into it, I would imagine.
Yes, the property was at the time just 1 year old. It was one of the flagship properties of the group. Hilton International was much smaller than what it is now. And after a couple of years, I was then transferred to a new property in Tokyo Bay, the Hilton Tokyo Bay.
Which also must have been reasonably new as well.
It was brand new. I was there part of the opening staff.
Oh, okay, right.
I joined there in a capacity of managing all the restaurants. So I think there were 13 at the time in that place. So we set up the opening and then got to a very, very fast start with, at the time, Disneyland didn't have too many restaurants. So when the park closed around 8 or 9 o'clock, we were flooded with guests. And
wow.
That property, was a great success from the outset. After another 2 to 3 years, I then moved to Singapore, where I had my first leadership role. Basically, I was managing the food and beverage operation of the Hilton in Singapore. And a couple of years later, I was asked to come back to Japan. In Nagoya, I looked at it as an opportunity to, do something different, and also.
So Nagoya, what year was that?
90. When is it? So, 88, 91, 93, 4. Is that probably that's when we met?
Yes, I think that must have been when we went in Nagoya.
You were posted
there.
You were posted there. I think this is where we met the first time.
Yes.
And
you were predecessor of Heinz Schwander?
No, actually, I was his assistant.
Oh, okay, right.
I was Heinz Schwander's assistant.
Because he was a GM, I remember.
Correct. Yes. He was my second GM in the property. The first one was a German guy. The second one was Heinz Schwander. I stayed there for 2.5 years. Meantime, I got married to a Japanese lady from Tokyo, and then we moved to Zurich, where I became a hotel manager in Zurich at the airport. And, for me, I thought that's it, Japan. And always keeping in touch with the leaders in Japan, Hilton group. And I was then given the opportunity to go back to Japan to open a property in Hokkaido.
This is up in Niseko?
No, it was in Otaru.
Otaru, okay.
It is no longer a Hilton managed property, but the property still exists, and it looks pretty much the same as when I left it. So I was there 4 years, and then I went back to Nagoya.
Okay.
As a GM this time. And I stayed there for a couple of years, just setting up the property for the expo.
Expo, yeah.
And then when the expo started, I was transferred to Tokyo. So more or less 20 years after I started as a trainee in Tokyo, I rejoined the property as a general manager.
Right.
I stayed 5 years in Tokyo, and then I was asked to go to Fukuoka to rebrand the Hawks Sea Hawk Hotel, which was managed by a different operator. They had a change in ownership, and the new owner asked us to rebrand the property, and it took a few years, but I stayed there for another 5 years, and I had a great time down there. It was a
great spot, Fukuoka.
Yeah, but it was one of the largest hotels, I think the third largest in Japan, all brands, and I think the largest except the properties in Hawaii that Hilton had at the time. So it was a huge property. I moved after 5 years to do another rebranding in Odaiba. The same operator that I had, taken over the property in Fukuoka, had a property in Odaiba, and we converted it into Hilton. After about a year, I thought, I had been doing a GM role for 4 or 5 times, and I had an opportunity to do something different. So I moved to the Middle East, to Abu Dhabi. And I became vice president for one region of the group Rotana, which is a UAE-based hotel operator. I was responsible for about 20 plus properties in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, Oman, Morocco, Egypt, although I never managed to get there because of COVID when I got assigned to the country. And then after 4 or 5 years, I thought, okay, I thought maybe I want to come back to Japan, and then I got an opportunity with Oakwood. That's why we're sitting here, where I was given the opportunity to be the country director for Oakwood in Japan and Korea. I obviously started right during COVID. We opened 3 properties during this period. I had not been able to travel to Korea. And then last year, Ascott, the Ascott group acquired Oakwood. And from November last year, I have been given the opportunity to manage all the assets in Japan. And the 2 South Korean properties went to my colleague who was with Ascott and looking after Japan and Korea like I did. So what we did, we split basically. I stayed in Japan and he went to Korea. And yeah, since then we've been working on the integration of Oakwood in the Ascott family.
They keep the brand name Oakwood though. They haven't changed to Ascott. They've kept Oakwood.
No, Ascott has got various brands.
Okay, right.
In Japan as well, and around the world. It's a large group, and obviously they were interested in the business model of Oakwood, which is what we call asset light, meaning it's a fee business. So in principle, a lot of the Oakwood properties were not owned or are not owned by either Ascott or Oakwood. Right. We work on management agreements, basically.
Right, as an operator.
Yeah.
So, amazing career, and congratulations on that. You've had such a varied career in different countries. So, thinking back to your first leadership experiences, and I guess, you must have been managing somebody in Shinjuku when you first arrived here. They give you someone to look after, I suppose, or you had some responsibility for some section, I guess. If you think back to those early parts of your career in Japan where you're managing people.
Mm-hmm.
You've come out of Europe, you've been trained there, you turn up in Japan. Well, I'm imagining it's quite different. So what were some things initially you thought, oh, this is a bit more tricky than I thought, or this is different to what I expected, or, well, that's new, I didn't think about that. What were some things that occurred to you as an initial manager, leader?
So, well, when I joined Hilton, I was initially assigned as a management trainee with a few projects to manage.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want, I didn't have the official management position, although I had to get things done on behalf of the management. So without having the real true, if you want, authority or grade or level within the organization, I was asked to, deal with a few projects. I think one of the things that I realized is that, and I guess it's a common knowledge, yes doesn't mean yes in this part of the world, correct? And probably, and you'll hear this a lot from me when we talk about general management, I think I learned the meaning of validation.
Okay, so what do you mean by the meaning of validation?
Well, you need to check, number one, if what you're saying is understood.
Right, okay.
And what do you mean by understood? It's whether it's not just registered, but whether it sounds like something for your audience. So do the people share what you're saying, your views, not even talking about values, but sometimes people have different values. So you need to adjust your language or your approach towards, your audience.
What would be an example of that? Say someone you noticed someone had, I don't know, values or style or something that was different, and then you think, okay, I need to adjust something here. What would be an example? Would it be your style of speech, speed of speech, directness of speech, manner, or how would you adjust? What would you do?
Well, when you are a young manager and you are in an environment that is pretty much, very much top down initially during those days. And then, you need to realize that leadership is also about influencing the business. So, when I was dealing with certain people who didn't necessarily see me as their boss, I had a few examples. So what would I do then? First of all, you have to be humble and show respect. But you have to be firm and put your arguments on the table. Now, it doesn't always work because you have sometimes cases where people just don't want to listen to you because they see you as a threat to their career. And, the only objective they have is sometimes, okay, this young kid, he doesn't know what he's talking about, so let's not help him. And yes, I had a few examples, and especially when the people I remember I was working in a restaurant and the manager was seeing me as a threat. Because he had been growing his career and he had a wealth of experience that I didn't have. So what I had to do, I had also, of course, to realize that he knew many more things than I did in many ways. So you need to respect those people. You need to respect their knowledge and not put them down. And the funny thing is that 20 years later, when I rejoined the property, he then reported to me.
He was still
officially,
there.
He was still there. and he was a great asset, So I think it wasn't love at first sight, and I think we respected each other a lot.
He probably told everybody, I trained Christian when he was here 20
I'm sure
years
he
ago.
did. And, in many ways, he was right because, I had a few tough encounters with him. But in the way, he also taught me how to be resilient. And if you believe in something, then you continue to, to push for it. So with that experience, when I talk about validation, first of all, for me, it's whether the person who you are talking to is believing in what you're saying. And then because he had a management position, also to make sure whether he was passing down, the message to his people. And that's one of the things which I think a lot of my, associates and subordinates have always been surprised is that I always validate at 1 or 2 levels below them.
That's a very interesting point you raise, because often senior leadership imagines that the messages that they are broadcasting are being driven down through middle management to the very people at the bottom. But in my experience, similarly, often middle management is they're like a sponge on the top and concrete on the bottom. And they suck up all the information from above, hold it as a power play or for whatever reason, and then it's concrete from then to the next layer down, and it just doesn't trickle down.
Well, they first of all, they tend to filter things out of convenience, or maybe sometimes out of not fully understanding what the message was in the first place. And then, the next level also tends to filter down and filter down, and then it's like you put a lot of water in your coffee, correct? So it's very diluted. And for me, it's always important to make sure that the people understand the message, especially in our industry where we have a lot of touch points. Hospitality industry, you want to make sure that the message gets properly communicated. It is always subject to dilution. I mean, you cannot avoid this. But then you do, and then what you also have to do, you have to from time to time remind the people and see whether the message is still alive, and if it is not, then you may have to repeat. At which time you do, you have to do it in a respectful and a humble manner, without, especially where in this part of Asia, and actually Asia in general, the face value is always important, so don't put them down. But yeah, so I have always, and the fact that during my many years in Japan, I was able to improve a bit my Japanese. So they knew that I could talk to people around me, around them, around or below the the department heads I was having. So yeah.
Did they feel threatened by that? Because often when the boss is talking to their subordinates, they worry, oh, what are they saying about me? What are the subordinates saying about me?
Yes.
What information is slipping out here that I've managed to keep suppressed for a very good long time? So do you brief them that, oh, look, by the way, I'm going to have a bit of a walk around. I'm going to talk to a few people in the team. Just want to get, create my relationship with them a bit more, or do you just go direct and do it anyway?
Well, obviously the objective is not to go behind the back of your people, because if you have people who work with you, part of a team that you manage, that need to have, constantly me going behind their back, then obviously there's an issue there. Either I don't understand them, or they don't understand me, or they're not, fully part of the team. So I by nature am not someone who likes to stay in the office. So people see in my work style, in my the way I behave, that I go to them. I go to the people. And
so those direct reports for you, though, how did you explain it to them? What did you say to them about what you're going to do?
Well, I would take them to the location that was the subject of a conversation. I would show them certain things that I feel needed to be improved or enhanced, or sometimes just to say thank you, well done. And they would also see that I would thank the people who report to him, and give him a face as well. So they would see there is already this direct communication with everybody in general. And then when there was an issue which was serious, the conversation took place under closed doors, of course, behind closed doors. And I would say, listen, I had seen something and I felt it was important for me to deal with this right away. Not to, stab you in the back, but this is what I have heard. And then I go around, I talk to people, do some jokes, sometimes not too funny, but anyway, just to break the ice with the people. So, they don't see me like someone who comes from his golden cage, and try to keep, relevant to the team. And yeah, and sometimes they talk to you, correct? And I always, when I spoke to someone about an experience I had, I always tend to I always will go and say, listen, this is what happened. Now, you need to take what I said, but you have to handle that. If you need some help and assistance to deal with the matters, I'm here. And again, I mean, I was probably in my younger days, I was much more, how shall I say, hard and harsh.
A bit more direct, maybe.
More direct, and because I learned Japanese in environments which were very much like, you know, a bit like a military, you know, the boss shouting at his. Sometimes, you know, my language was maybe not the most appropriate, but
also when you're dealing, you speak a number of foreign languages, I'm sure, but it's a classic case of when you're learning a new language, you have a very limited vocabulary.
I had in the beginning, definitely.
So your reference of the subtleties or the nuance of words was not there. So if you get the sentence out, you're happy, you know.
And yeah, and then obviously when you deal with when you start to deal with people who are good at what they're doing, who are proud at what they're doing, obviously you get sometimes people who say, "Hey, don't talk to me like this." And from time to time, you know, you have to accept and say, "Hey, wait a minute, he's right." Okay, and then I guess this is what you learn during your career, that sometimes you have to change your approach. And for me, I had different cases where there were clashes, and you know, you just let things settle down, and then even if it is not my mistake or my fault, I would try to be the one to go and say, listen, let's talk it out, talk it over.
Also, you know, you're a very tall, imposing person from a Japanese point of view, because most Japanese are not very tall. So you represent physically, you know, a tall man looking down at smaller Japanese. So even if your words are not necessarily so hard or harsh, just your physicality could be intimidating, I guess, for some people as well.
Yeah, I never thought about that, but yeah, I mean, looking down at people is something that can be quite, you know, scary for some people. Again, you know, if you're in a certain position of authority, and not to brag, but you know, the fact that you have to talk down to people simply physically, you know, maybe that's accepted. The only thing I know about when you talk about this is that whenever I was entering the offices, that people knew, Baudat-san is coming back to the office, the way I walk, and you know, so people were, oh God, what's going on? But I think also when we have conversations with our people, I would tend to do it sitting down.
Right.
And also, like we're sitting now. So if I have an important discussion, I don't sit behind my desk.
Right.
I sit on the other side of the table, and we have two chairs, and we look at each other like this. So again, to break a bit the ice, and to when I do it, then the other party would say, okay, something is happening there, or it's serious or whatever. Or I would take them out of the office, go to a quiet place, and say, listen, let's have a talk or something like this. So yeah, try not to be in a position where I'm looking down physically at them, so that they don't feel like intimidated by my physique, if you want.
Yeah, it's interesting. I worked in a previous company where I remember someone pointed out how one of the leaders, who's again like you, quite a tall, imposing sort of guy, he actually had worked out to reduce his energy, to not diminish his size, because you can't diminish your height, but to really, in some cases when he's dealing with the Japanese or non-Europeans or whatever, to really drop the energy and take a lot of that threat or that feeling of intimidation possibly, or just the overpoweringness of the physical proximity, to try and help people feel a bit calmer in dealing with him, the way he spoke, the way he moved. He actually mentally at some point had worked out that maybe he was a bit too much, for them, and he had to tone himself down again in Asia to fit in. So interesting point.
I think it is not just something that is typical to Japan. Okay, the fact that I may be taller than the average Japanese colleague is, yeah, that's a fact. But it's also the same maybe in other countries. I think the most important thing generally in terms of leading is to have a respectful behavior and attitude towards the person you're talking to. If you just want to exchange ideas, if you want something from the person who's sitting opposite of you, or if you just want maybe to provide an advice or counsel the person. Either way, I think wherever you are, and I think especially now when you deal with a younger generation, it's not a given that they will accept you as a leader at the outset. You have to.
You feel that there's a change there?
I think so.
How do you ascertain that? I mean, generally speaking, subordinates are pretty ninja-like at masking their thinking and masking their exposure and expressions to bosses, so they can sort of fit in. But, subterranean, they may be thinking something entirely different, and I don't really want to follow this boss or leader, or I don't respect this boss or leader, I disagree or whatever. So how have you sort of ascertained that things have sort of had a movement there?
Well, again, validate. So you explain. You try to start a conversation to assess whether, we are aligned. And then I would then, after a while, discuss with the group where that person, for example, belongs, and just to see if the message has passed through and so on. When it comes to, understanding the expectations, I found that recently, the behavior or the attitude is more like, what can I do for the company, but what can the company do for me? And it's nothing I can change as such.
Is it something that's coming up in interviews when you're hiring people? Is it something that's coming up in performance reviews when you're talking about their career in the company? How are you getting this triggered, or this feeling that there's a power shift here, or an attitudinal or expectation shift? What are the sort of triggers you're noticing?
Well, it can start with interviews, where, some people are very clear as to what they want or they don't want to do. Just getting a job is not enough. I think the attitude of, okay, I just get a job and do what the boss wants, I think that's no longer the case. So in interviews, people would choose certain career paths and make it clear that, and I didn't really see this during the earlier stages of my career. And then, certain examples or certain experiences I had recently where, someone said he didn't want to do a certain role, felt that didn't fit him. So you just wonder, why did he take the job, for example? And these kind of responses were not common, in my 30s or when I became department head. And maybe also because I have a 25 years old daughter who sometimes talks about her experiences at home and at work, but when we are at home, and I say, wait a minute, that's not the way it's supposed to be. But I guess it's a generation issue, and
my daughter's 29 and talks about work with me too. Sometimes I think, well, maybe just sort of suck up a bit harder here and be a bit more resilient and stop whinging and keep going with it. You'll get there.
Yes, they always have a bit like the victim mode, so higaisha mode, like you say in Japanese. So, but again, they also, maybe that's because her upbringing, but they're also much more independent. So if you deal with people from who studied overseas or people who lived overseas, Japanese as well, they obviously are much more assertive and proactive in expressing their views.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it also has to do with the fact that, you know, when I was in a younger leadership position, I was dealing with junior people who had just freshly joined the industry and had so much to learn. And now in my position, I'm fortunate to have a very good team with me, but that has much more experience, correct? So, and they also have an opinion, and they are where they are because they also were able to, you know, to defend themselves and explain and basically deliver something. So they are much more confident in what they do. And that's one thing you have to realize as well. I mean, respect the people who are working with you and listen to them.
In terms of your experience in Japan, because you've had a number of leadership level roles here, including the GMs of a number of big hotels, what things did you find work well for you to get the team really engaged? Because, you know, there is always an issue of, generationally it changes, I guess, but, you know, I have a job, I get paid, I turn up, that's enough, as opposed to we're rebranding this property or we're launching this property, and there's a certain energy and a certain passion and enthusiasm for the work. But some people don't ever get that, but others do. And you find that I do these sorts of things, I get more energy, commitment, engagement, passion from the team for the work. What things have you found works well in that regard?
Well, you use the word passion, and for me it's very important. So you have to walk the talk. And if you want your people to be passionate about what they do, you have to be passionate about what you do as well. And, you know, I think people know if I'm in a good mood or bad mood, and people see if I'm passionate about something or not, because I tend to express it either body language or the way I talk about certain things. And sometimes I never stop talking about it. So it means they know that I'm very passionate. So first of all, you have to show that you believe in what you're trying to, you know, have done. You believe in what you want to push through. I think that's the most important thing, because if people say that you're just a messenger and you don't believe in whatever you're trying to push, they won't buy it, okay? So a good salesman has to be passionate about what he sells, or at least it has to appear as being passionate about what he sells. But in the end, if he doesn't believe in the product, he won't be so successful.
He won't be successful. No.
So I think that was really, I think, the important thing. And then the other thing, which I always tell my team, you know, gratitude. So people come to us as a guest by choice. So we have to be grateful of them choosing us. But now it's the same for our associates. I tell HR and I tell people who have newcomers, I say, guys, don't bully the newcomers. You have to be, you know, show gratitude that they actually chose to come with you.
Because today they have a lot of choices.
Correct.
Yeah, especially in the hospitality area, I guess, you know. I mean, there's been a downturn in the numbers because of COVID, but in terms of, there are lots of people, I think I saw in the paper today, something like 85% of restaurants feel they're short-staffed or this type of thing. So there's a bigger demand than there is a supply, and demand and supply in economics tells you very quickly where the power lies, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think that unfortunately during COVID, people realized there are other options in terms of professional choices. Plus, this part of the world relies a lot on, you know, casual labor, part-timers who found other occupations and are not too keen to come back, you know. A lot prefer to ride on a bicycle and do Uber Eat jobs, which are, I think, tough as well, than actually work, you know, in a hospitality industry as a part-timer to, you know, to earn their life or to pay for their studies, or I guess because they feel they are their own boss, you know, and they have maybe more choices. So the labor shortage, the talent shortage is a big issue we have in our industry, absolutely. So that's why we have to, you know, when someone comes to me and says, oh, this person is no good, I said, okay, why?
Mm.
Okay, what can we do? Can we find a role that fits more their personality or their skill set, instead of saying, okay, let that person go? Because there are less people who are willing to join our industry, and the ones who are willing to join the industry maybe don't have always the same mindset that we had many years ago, because there's so much choice around.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. I think you're right. I'll give you an example. Recently, there's a very nice Italian pizza outlet in Ebisu. They have a headquarters in Napoli. So this is the local Japanese headquarters here, and been going there since they opened. And earlier this year, it was a very cold, windy night, maybe March. And I dropped my wife off while I was going to park the car. She'd go and get the table. And as I was sort of driving away, I noticed in the rear vision mirror, she's standing on the street out in the wind and the cold. I thought, that's a bit odd. So I parked the car, came back, said, what's going on? Why? And she was in the restaurant by that time. She said, oh, the waiter told me to wait outside. This is Japan. What? And this guy's in his 40s. He's not a kid. And I looked at the guy. I said, why did you make my wife stand outside in the cold and the wind when she could have been inside the restaurant when you got the table cleared? Oh, Moshiwake I'm terribly sorry. So you're the manager? No. Who's the manager? This guy. Get him over here, you know. But I thought to myself, that restaurant is facing the problem, the talent problem that you mentioned before. We're all going to face of simply not enough people. So people who normally we wouldn't even entertain employing, we'll employ them because we just need people. So how you deal with them, how you train them, which jobs you give them, we're going to have a lot more flexibility as leaders, I think, going forward than we've ever had to have, in my view. And that just a simple little metaphor for me. When I saw that, I thought, I get it. You guys can't get staff to wait, and you're going to take anybody, and this guy's an absolute idiot, and he shouldn't be employed, but you're going to take him anyway because you've got no choice. And that's going to be all of us, is what I was thinking to myself.
Yes, in many ways, yes. But you know, again, that 40 years old guy who, you know, kept your wife waiting outside, maybe he was following some kind of a manual.
Could be.
And you know, hearing what you say, you can react two ways. You can say, oh my goodness, this guy shouldn't be there. Or you have to think, okay, why does he react like this? And if you're a manager of today, you have to realize, okay, you have to check why. Is it because my instructions were wrong? Is it because the gentleman doesn't understand, or is afraid to let the guest in and wait in front or inside? There's many reasons why maybe he has done that. And as a manager, I think you need to realize, you need to check this first before you judge as to whether this person is in the right role or not. And I think that's one of the challenges that I'm trying to one of the things I'm trying to discuss with the team. I had yesterday a lunch with all my property managers, the residences managers or the GMs, and we were talking about the current issues we have. And I said, guys, you need to sit with your team, and you need to understand if this person, I mean, we were talking about some people who recently joined us and who didn't feel comfortable to work in a luxury product of ours and preferred to go to what they thought was, more simple. But we need to, instead of saying, oh, why are they reacting like this? We need to say, okay, we need to talk to them and validate their views on what is service industry, correct?
And in the past, you would have just said,
out,
go or out,
Yeah.
You had a choice, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a whole bunch of other candidates waiting in the wings. Don't like that one, we replace them. But today, maybe the replacement's just not that easy to find.
It's not easy to find. And again, maybe that person actually doesn't meant to harm your wife. It's just the values that he had, been taught. And so, just don't at the outset say this person is hopeless. We can't deal with that person. I think you need to give people a chance. And one of the key roles of the leadership, I think, in today's days is to give people a chance and guide and coach. And you might find some jewels, you might find some people who end up being your stars. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but at least you've tried.
You try. And in terms of, one of the critical entry points to getting creative ideas, innovation, improvements, be it Kaizen or big leaps, is that people care. And so we talked before about the importance of, getting engagement and how you get engagement. We talked about that a little bit. So thinking about that, presuming you've got people engaged, what things have you found worked well to draw ideas out of the team, as opposed to the boss is the total repository of all the ideas and the boss just gives all the ideas to the team, as opposed to the boss is getting ideas from the team? What have you found works well in terms of getting innovation from
Well,
teams?
you've got different situations. You've got situations where maybe you do it for the first time, so they wait for you to speak up first, okay? So, all right, so that may take a bit of time to warm them up. And one of the other things is, and that's probably something in our industry where people don't really get out much. So, I would encourage people to network with non-hospitality people, different industries, creative members, people who are in IT, marketing, and or fashion, for example, and that just to open them to other things. I attended a seminar the other day about delighting guests in Japanese by one of the chambers of commerce. Actually, it was a joint event. And one of the things that I found quite interesting was there was a representative, Louis Vuitton, LMVH, who was telling that Mr. Arnaud, the founder, told his people where to get new trends for ladies, shoppers. And he was telling his people to look at Japan, to look at customers who walk through Shibuya, the young kokosei, because they were always very fashion conscious, and they are probably starting a trend that then would could become a global trend.
Later,
So in the same, in thinking about what he said, I said, I personally tried, I do interact with my colleagues of the industry, and I have some very good friends in the industry, but I also tried always to look outside and get ideas of, what can be done within my own environment, but also encourage the people that are working with you and also, should come up with ideas and to understand the trends, see what's going on around, walking into department stores, where, for example, if you're in the food and beverage industry, You go in Depatica and you can see all these different trends. You go on Valentine, you see the 200 types of chocolates, and you see the creativity. So what I would do is to tell the people, listen, go out, see what's happening in the world, and don't be afraid to come up with something. And a lot of good ideas come, sometimes not too, but let's try. It works. So that's I think another very important thing is don't discourage people to fail. Okay, I mean, they can fail, they have to learn, and then go on with something else or something different. But
that's a very good point, because as you and I both know, having lived here a long time, this is a no defect, no failure, no error society where these things are usually not tolerated. That's why I always think that sort of, new products that aren't fully developed, are going to have trouble here. When people make mistakes, how they're handled makes a big difference here. And so that messy process of innovation, of trial and things, by its very nature, it's going to have problems, So the organization has to assure the people that you have permission to fail when you're doing something new, and we'll either succeed or we'll learn. And there is no failure. But that concept is not necessarily rooted in the culture here. So what do you do to assure people that it's okay to try things? It's okay. And if they don't work, we'll learn, or we'll improve it, or we'll reject it. How do you go about giving them the freedom to overcome their cultural bias against trying things and failing?
Well, I guess it's my day-to-day behavior where I say, try. Works, it works. Doesn't work, okay, fine. What I do not accept is people not trying. Okay. So I would say, listen, status quo is a no-go. For certain things, yes, you need to have stability. But what I want people in a leadership position, and people who have to encourage their teams and so on, and I want them to not stand still. And
how do you do that though? Because the culture here is stability, harmony. I make this joke, Christian, about, I say to people, Japanese love change. They look at me like I've gone completely nuts, I say, yeah, they love change. They want the company to change. They want their boss to change. They want their colleagues to change. They want the clients to change. They want the market to change, but they don't want to change, So when you have that sort of, don't rock the boat type of mentality, and actually encouraging people to put their hand up, to suggest something, to step out, to do something that hasn't been done before, we're overcoming a lot of baggage, I think, in the culture here to do that. So what have you found works well to encourage people to try, to raise their voice? Because it's the easiest way to make no error in Japan is to do nothing. So if you want them to do something, you've got to get them to encourage them to do that. What have you found works well in that regard?
I think, first of all, our organization is reasonably flat, if you want.
Right, okay.
We don't have too many levels. And it's pretty streamlined. I have direct relationship with the CEO of the company. If I would have been maybe with a larger organization, there would have been various layers. And to be able to convey the message, or to be able to convey to the team that I have been entrusted and empowered to drive change. There is no the right way or the wrong way. There is the best way. And I think this is a company culture as well. So first of all, I have this alibi, if you want, which I can communicate to the team. And then
the alibi is that you take responsibility. Is that the alibi?
Well, yes and no. I mean, as a leader, you have to be responsible and accountable. And you have to tell the team, okay, let's try. You can try. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. And if I have to explain it to someone, I will explain it to someone. Okay, you have the authority to change certain things. I'll
give you air cover.
I give you air cover, and so the people feel protected in a way. There's an environment where they feel they're not going to be shot down if something goes wrong. I said I'll be shot if it's necessary. Don't worry. And the other thing is when something works, give them credit.
Yeah.
Don't take the credit. Like say,
I'm a genius.
I'm a genius, and then the people who have actually come up with the idea will say, "Hey, what's wrong with this guy?
Yeah. What happened?
That was my idea."
Exactly. Thank you for stealing my idea and making yourself look good with your boss. Yeah. Which happens, right? Which happens.
Yes, and those kind of bosses don't have usually a very long lifespan, correct?
That's true.
Because
that's a good segue into the question about trust, isn't it? Because telling people, look, we're looking for the best way. We might find, things that don't work, but it's okay. Oh, we're going to try it. I give you permission. I give you air cover. Then they do something. They make a mistake, and then you go whack across the head for making a mistake. Well, boom, hang on, wait a minute. The boss said one thing, but he actually did another. Or, yeah, let's have the great ideas. Yeah, and then you scoop up the ideas and you tell your boss what a genius you are, and then they get no accreditation for that or no recognition for that. Again, hang on a minute, wait a minute, that was my idea. Why is he taking all the credit for that? So when you think about building trust in Japan, what things have you found works well in building trust here?
Well, as you know, the notion of individuality is not always very strong. Although, you see the Hondas, some of the founders of some of the big companies, Panasonic and so on, they were very strong individuals as such. But I think the building the trust is also to be able to work hand in hand. And if you see that certain people need resources, or that you're basically able to bring in some support or some help, some assistance, so that they see, okay, if there's something to be done and there's a blank somewhere, if you are able to fill in the blank or to create a link that allows them to move forward without saying, I'm the boss, I'm going to tell you what to do. Oh, okay, yeah, I see a problem. Okay, let me make a call and I see if I can get someone to help you. And then let them do things. People will say, this guy understands what we are doing. He understands the challenge we have. And then if there is a missing link, he's able to, assist us in getting this missing
supporting
link.
me.
It's support, yeah. And at the same time, your support is not effective if it's not, fully understood. So the fact that they see that you understand their challenges and that you can bring in something to the table, because it's like in the culinary world, you will gain trust and respect if your subordinates can learn something from you. I've noticed this in particular with the culinary world, where a chef who comes from overseas and is not able to teach the people, like artisans, if you want, and he cannot show his skills, and he cannot show what he's actually able to do, he will not gain the trust. And he will be put aside. In Japan, you know how it is. You're not being told right in your face. So you're being pushed in a corner until, or at the edge of a cliff until you have only one choice, is either jump or just say, okay, that's it, I give up, correct? Earning the trust is to show the people that actually you know what you're talking about and you can help them to get their job done.
You talked before about, you've hotels that started up or rebranded or, taking on big responsibilities with big organizations, like Seahawk, that type of thing. What have you found works well in terms of building a culture? Because generally speaking, there's a global culture around the world, but then of course there's always the local variations of that. And then you have the team within that, like you have global Japan, then you have like the Seahawk team or the Hilton team here or there, or the Oakwood team or whatever. So you've got sort of different levels of culture. In terms of sort of what you've found works well in building a culture in a team, what things have you worked on there?
That's $1 million question. I think in my past experience, whenever I took over a team, first of all, don't disregard the existing culture. Try to understand it. Because people in our industry, hospitality industry, everybody is joined more or less for the same reason. They want to be in the hospitality industry. They want to have a guest contact. They want to be, in front of customers and please and excel in what they're doing. Now, how they do it and what they have been taught on how to get there can create this different culture, correct? And I think the reason why people are there is something that we need to remind them. Guys, we're all here for the same reason. There's many different ways to get there, but let's see how we can create our own culture. Because again, I hated when I was working in the company and, this is the Hawks way and this is the XX way. No, let's do, and this is one of the reasons why I was actually very pleased to be able to give him, able to move over to Ascott, because I had been told, listen, we understand it's a big role to take over and integrate these two companies. So the objective is the same. We have to please our guests. We have to generate returns for our owners and strengthen the value of our brands. And do what you think is right. And, there's not 200 ways of doing the right thing in providing a service to the guest. So for me, the best thing to change or get a new culture that works and that is relevant at the time is to, respect the heritage of the company that we may be taking over and explain what are the objectives and how we can get there together. It doesn't always work. You have certain people who don't feel comfortable to stay within this new, if you want, environment. They were more comfortable in the previous, and those people would typically leave, and it's fine, So
I think you get that too in the sense of when I worked at Shinsei Bank in the retail bank, at one point there, I don't know, I can't remember how I realized it, but we were doing quite a lot of recruiting. We had a thing called the Shinsei Dream going at that time, and we were getting a lot of really good quality people. But at some point, the balance between the existing team and the recently hired team changed. And I realized, we've got more mid-career hires in this team now than we have who originally been with the bank for a number of years. So what's the culture of this organization now? Because what we've got is no dominant culture anymore. Because the dominant culture is this disparate of all these other individuals bringing the cultures of these other companies with them. So I talked to my boss at that time and I said, look, I've realized this. I think we need to build a Shinsei culture that is like a one culture, and new people come in, they absorb into that rather than having a disparate set of cultures. Let's make one culture. And we worked on that, and we did a lot of work on that. So, but in your industry too, you've got a lot of people coming and going, I guess, and you're trying to, how do you absorb people who are coming from a different industry, or even not necessarily industry, maybe a different organization who've had a certain culture, they've got to now adjust to your culture or become an acolyte for that culture. How does that work for you?
Well, I mean, if you really think very carefully, I mean, what you want out of the culture is pretty much the same, correct? So you have to find a common language. You have to formulate maybe a message that is easy for everybody to understand, and then you have to walk the talk. So if you say you're going to give better work-life balance, for example, you have to provide this to the people. If you say, okay, listen, there's no shouting and screaming, then you have to make sure you don't shout and
don't shout or scream at anyone yourself, right?
but I guess there are certain people who believe in the mission statements and all the company credos and stuff like that. I think it can help. Sometimes it depends on how mature the organization is and if there's a lot of tweaking that is required or not. But I think it's just to communicate, and validate if people are aligned or not, and if they are not aligned, okay, what needs to be done through networking, bonding exercises, and I think if you want to create a culture, where people feel comfortable to express themselves. People feel comfortable to try and sometimes fail. And also where certain people want to grow and certain people are happy with what they're doing. And those people are very often very important.
Very stable.
Yeah, and you have those people are sometimes the pillar of the organization, because they are the ones who, if they leave, all of a sudden you will feel the gap. So I think that the trust or the culture is something that comes with talking to the people, listening to the people. And one of the most important things for a leader is to listen to his people. Then realize if there's a certain level of gap that you need to fill.
If you're going to give some advice to someone who is being told, okay, you go to Japan, you're going to run an organization in Japan. They don't know Japan. They don't speak Japanese. Get on the plane. If they'd been smart, they would have been listening to the 150 plus episodes of this podcast before they got on the plane, but presuming they haven't discovered it yet. But if they had a chance to get some advice from you on how to be effective here in Japan as a leader, what advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, remember, yes is not a yes. Hi means I hear you. Doesn't necessarily mean I agree with you. Then listen and observe. Don't be put off by, oh, this is Japan. Because in many ways, it's not so different from other parts of the world. But instead of just saying no, just say, okay, so show me what Japan is. So listen, and when I start in any job, okay, my first month is a sponge mode. I absorb. My second month is a processing. So I squeeze a bit the sponge and see what comes out of it. And I start to formulate certain directions I want to go. And the third month is when I explain and start to execute. So I have always this 90 days
90-day
period. But what is really important is that you need, if you come and have no exposure to Japan, you need to understand also when people are silent, because silence can mean a lot of things, correct? So listen, observe. First is very important. Don't come and just try to destroy everything, because you need.
Japan's broken. Luckily, I'm here to fix it.
No, you know, and you and I know. The more you think you know about it, the least you actually do, correct?
Exactly.
And in the end, I think, don't disrespect the people that have been, keeping the company alive and done well. So respect and listen, and then, if you don't understand, just don't be afraid to say, sorry, I don't understand. You have to show also a bit your human nature, correct? And then when you have to make some tough decisions, make the tough decisions. I think people also expect you, whether it's in Japan or everywhere around the world, you have to be fair, but you have to also be able to take some decisions that others don't want to take for the good of the company, or for the good of the group. So I for people who start in Japan, I would really say listen and observe.
Should they learn Japanese?
I think it can help. I don't think this is the priority. But I think that if you're there for the long run, yes, it would help. I've learned Japanese by obligation in a way that I actually never learned how to read and write. I found myself in my second job with 220 people reporting to me. 160 were new graduates with zero experience in the hospitality industry other than their school or vocational school, and 90% did not speak English.
Okay.
So
that's exciting.
Yeah, it was exciting. So, you know, and then maybe at the time my vocabulary was very restricted, and you know, probably the words that I remember, the ones that some of my Japanese superiors at the time had pushed down to me. But yeah, so Japanese is, if you stay here for the long run, I think it is a plus. It makes sense, because it also shows, you know, you I think also with the nuances and stuff like this, it helps your communication. So I wouldn't put this as a first priority. I think what is important is, first of all, to understand and listen to the people. Now, you will tell me that if you don't speak the language, how can you listen, correct? So then you need to find someone that you can trust, and a very good translator if it's needed. But even through a translator, I think you can understand. And obviously you need a translator that doesn't filter things like it often happens. But
also, I think when you're dealing in foreign languages, because you can't understand everything that's going on, your read of the body language becomes very sensitive.
Absolutely.
And you're observing really beyond the words what's going on here. And then you're getting a sense of what's going on here with that person, how they're feeling, which is probably a very heightened sensitivity. When we speak in English, you're an excellent English speaker, right? So I don't have to really zero in and observe every nuance of your body language, because we're speaking perfectly in English. But if we were speaking in I don't know, French or Swiss or something like that I didn't speak, or German or something, then I would be, you know, struggling, but I'll be observing you very carefully. And probably when we're dealing with Japanese language, we're probably doing the same thing. We're observing them really critically to suck every possible extract of information out of that messaging they're giving us.
Yeah, so the tone of the voice and the sound of the phrase sometimes will tell you, you know, maybe more than the words, okay? Thing that you have to be careful is if you are doing this in a too obvious way, you know, always observing like this, the person that is talking to you will feel quite uncomfortable, because they don't
interrogation.
Oh my God, what's going on there? But yes, you know, one of the things that I always tell people who say, oh, I don't speak good English, I said, listen, you don't have to understand 100%.
No.
You have to understand the meaning and what is being communicated. But maybe you don't understand some of the words individually. You know, you don't always understand 100%. But as long as you can communicate, and, you know, my first encounters with people when I started to speak Japanese was, they looked at me with a big question mark on their head. And I said to them, you understand, correct? Wakarimasu ne. And then they said, hi. I said, okay, fine, move on, you know.
Did well.
So, and okay, it was far from being perfect. Now it's still far from being perfect when I speak Japanese. But as long as the message gets through, I think it is very important.
What's your definition of leadership then, Christian?
Well, it starts with lead. So lead means guide. It can mean a lot of things, correct? But I think a good leader, or the definition of leadership, is probably ability to influence in a positive way the environment or the area or the place that you are supposed to lead. And yeah, I think the word influence is important. The fact that you can generate trust and growth. A good leader would be able to grow not just the company, but also grow the people. And a good leader is also a good human being, I think. You know,
That's a good point.
you hear a lot of people have a high IQ and low EQ.
Yeah.
It can work for a while, but in the end, you know, I think someone who has a low EQ but super smart and is in a leadership position might find himself one day very lonely.
And I think there's a certain limit to how much responsibility organizations are prepared to give someone like that, because ultimately it's all about people.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how, unless you've got robots, but if it's about people, you've got to be able to lead them. So.
Well, I think also the notion of leadership will also change with, you know, all the technologies and all the tools that you now have, you know, AI and so on, may also have an influence on what the leader of the future is. And you know, maybe for certain leaders less interaction, more technical knowledge. But in my industry, I think, as you said, the people remain the key for our business, whether it is our customers or whether it is our associates.
Well, thank you very much, Christian. I've really enjoyed hearing your background and your thoughts and insights. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Good conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.